I think it's important that we take a step back and looking at what does it mean to design in this new context that we have in leveraging this technology. All of you have touched on it and using it in some capacity at some point, right? And I think it's important, though, to look at what are the things that remain to be true as you continue to design and design experiences for people. Um, and so let's actually jump into that. We'll take some questions at the end. Hopefully, there will be time. I think I budgeted enough time for us to have some questions. Um, all right. So I want to start off with my journey because it also helps to set the framework for how I think and how I approach the work that I do. Some of this may sound more familiar to some of you, but to the others that will probably be watching this recording, it won't be familiar. So my journey started as a product design intern in 1997. That for me is when the bug bit me. It was at that moment that I recognized that this opportunity to be able to solve problems using design with the central focus being on people for me was exciting, for me was what I wanted to devote my time, my energy towards. And so that sent me off into the direction of my education where I studied industrial design at RISD. I studied product design at Strauss School of Design in Paris. Also studied product development at MIT and product management at General Assembly. For me, trying to understand all of the different aspects of developing product was important for me to really wrap my mind around what is possible when it comes to um, solving problems and what is possible when it comes to a question that serves as the anchor point for me in my journey, which I'll get to you. I'm going to basically share with you what happens in my brain constantly. And one of the things that happens in my mind is this question that I'm constantly asking myself, which is, how can I improve the lives of everyday people through design? This has been the question since 1997, quite frankly. This question has never left me. This question is how I even approach the way in which I share information, the way in which I teach, the way in which I run my company, the way in which I've done projects that I'll share with you in the past. It always comes from the work that I do and the way I approach things is from this lens in which I see the world. Um, and again, it's driven my design approach. And again, it also operates as the compass when navigating even career opportunities. When deciding on, in the past, when I was looking for jobs to take, I would ask myself the question, in this role, do I have the opportunity to improve the lives of everyday people through design? And for me, if I could answer that question confidently, then that was something worth pursuing. If I couldn't, then that was something that I would have to sort of think about and look at my bank account and see if I wanted to substitute with that, right? But this was a very real anchoring question for me because operating in this space, it was allowing me to operate in areas that I felt strong in. It also allowed for me to learn more about ways in which I can continue to approach this way of designing, this way of problem solving, and creating experiences ultimately was is always going to be through this question that I will ask. So if you see me do a thing, this is it's answering this question usually, right? So I want to also set the foundation as I go into some of these projects and the work that I have done, redefining. what design is for me, right? The way in which how I answer the question that I just shared with you, and how I look at the term design, because it is defined in many different ways. And that is, that's okay. And that's by choice of those who are practicing this work. For me, though, design is the intentional act of shaping interactions, environments, and outcomes by understanding the interdependence between people, process, product, and purpose. These four P's are the components to whatever answer, and however I go about answering that question on how am I improving the lives of people through design. It is by looking at these four P's: the people, the processes, the product, and the purpose. Um, and to break that down even further, for me, when I talk about purpose, ultimately I am talking about the why, right? I'm talking about, well, why does this problem exist? Why are we even approaching, this a solution in this area? The process being, how should I approach, this problem? How should I consider, different factors within the solution that is that's necessary. Who are the people? The people is the who. Are these the end users? Are these internal? Are these external people? Are these stakeholders? Who are these people? And really wrapping my mind around the people, and then the product. At the end of looking at what's the why, how are we going through? How am I going to solve this problem? And who are the people? Ultimately, the product surfaces. What is that solution that ultimately becomes more clear and apparent? And so uh, this is something that you'll see, and I'll touch on a little bit as I go through four main areas of projects and roles that I have had in my career. And that's where I want to lead us into next. So in 2006, that is when I started freelancing and developing websites and brand collateral for small businesses. And to be honest and to be transparent, I did this because the job that I had upon graduation wasn't giving me the opportunity to answer that very question that I proposed in the beginning. And so, because that question is very much an important part of my life and how I go about the work that I do, I found this as an opportunity to do so, where I could um, have conversations with people, sharing with them what it is that I could do in terms of design, because my background was not just in product design, but it was also in I could do, brand design work, and my background before that and my training was in visual arts and fine arts, and that's something that served as a foundation for me. So when it came to engaging with small business owners, I shared with them just sort of like this laundry list of, hey, I can do all these things in the realm of design. And what that afforded me, though, was the opportunity to learn more about these people. It allowed for me to learn more about the industries in which they were operating in. And so when it came to developing, say, websites or brand collateral, this was happening for folks who had local restaurants. One of my clients early on, he had two Italian restaurants in Georgia that he needed to both have the websites redone, and then implementing different kinds of engagement where the users could access their their menu that was always changing. So how can they have on their website a dynamic menu? And this is, in the early 2000s where they were looking to have this take place. Um, and so for me, what was exciting wasn't so much about what the output was going to be in this sort of dynamic menu creation and this redevelopment of their website. What was really fascinating with them, which is true for a lot of the other businesses, was this opportunity for me to um, engage with, um, you know, people in their businesses in a way that allowed for them to focus on the growth aspect of their business. And so, what do I mean by that? Because I was coming in and being able to share with them the value and what was possible with design in terms of engagement, in terms of micro interactions, in terms of other aspects that was communicating what their goal or what their service or what their product was, it was actually removing an area or an aspect to their the way in which they were operating that I wasn't even aware of, right? And so what that means is that they they now could think less about uh, whether or not the website, for example, was truly giving their customers the experience that they wanted or that was true for their business. Now they could focus on, the actual menu items themselves, like the food that they want to prepare or change up something and introduce a new recipe or create a new in-house experience that was going to uh, allow for their returning customers to be satisfied, and whatever that looked like for each business owner. It allowed for them to engage more into the area of the business that was actually attributing to the growth. And this was something that was new for me to see and also new for them to see, because you have to understand that during this time, a lot of businesses, especially small businesses, they really did not see the value of design. They saw it, they came to me with the introduction that all I was going to do was make the thing look better. Period. That was it. It's like, can you make this look pretty? Right? And through the conversations that we were having, they what started to surface for them was the need to think about the whole system, right? The need to think about, okay, well, it's yes, you're trying to create a dynamic menu and you want your website to look better, but what is that all leading towards, right? What are we actually trying to solve for in the end? Is it really to communicate your message in a static way? Is it to allow for them to get an experience with your food before they enter into the restaurant? What exactly are we trying to achieve with the work that you want me to do, essentially? And so by asking these really important questions and really getting them to think deeply about what was important for them, it allowed for, again, both them and I to see how there are many more aspects to the work of creating a interactive experience that was not just based on really great colors. It wasn't just based on a format or micro interactions, that it was also based on intentionality. It was based on, being able to understand what's the connective tissue or the process that is important for both the business and their users. And so what was also really great about working with these different small businesses at the time, and developing websites and developing products, digital products, like applications. uh, it was also allowing for me to advocate for the business impact of design, which is something that is a nice byproduct of doing the work that you do well, is being able to gain advocates who are not designers, people who don't really see design as important as we do, but to get them to see it in a way that they then can create job opportunities, right? Because based on this introduction, now they see in order for this experience to continue on, instead of just having a or hiring a consultant, now they could have an in-house designer that they can pay a salary to continue to elevate their work, etc. And so this is what was happening as a result of the conversations and the work that I was doing with these small business owners, is that they were now seeing this value. They were also seeing this larger system of design, and they were also seeing how, in order for them to maintain this level or this type of engagement or these experiences, that they had to think about how to continue to engage designers, whether they were going to hire one full time or they were going to create a budget that was long term for a designer to come in or design to work with the designer. So that was early on in my career, was having these unique experiences that connected all of these different businesses, was this sort of surfacing of seeing this sort of this system of how we can approach design. That was a huge influence for me, as I continue to mature on in my career, in the work that I did, because what I started to do is I started to see that design was less of an output, meaning it was less about what the website looked like, and it was less about this application, or less about branding work, and how those visuals connected. And it became more about how could I now take these same methodologies, these same considerations, and apply it to something that was more systemic. And so why I share that is because that allowed me to gain a level of skill sets that I could attribute to designing something like this. And so at GitHub, I was brought on to build out a learning system and programs to help the 90 plus designers grow, by learning from each other. And so this required not only a systems level of thinking, but also thinking about service design methodologies as well, to uncover a scalable solution. And so my actual title was, as a design ops, as a senior program manager within their design operations team. And what I also had to look at when approaching the challenge that was given to me was I had to look at how the solution that I was going to create in design, how that was going to impact not only all of the different departments that these designers sat under, but also how was that going to impact the individuals within each of those departments. And so I also want to give you the context of sharing with you what was also evident during this time and this challenge that I was faced with when it comes to designing a solution, and when it comes to designing with a full understanding of the context and the systems at work. During this time, this was in 2022 and 2023. And during this time, if you can recall, there were many designers that were being laid off from different tech companies. And so within GitHub, similarly to many others, as they're seeing what's happening in the industry, they were feeling pretty pretty low in terms of morale. They were They weren't really feeling as confident in job security, much less, any kind of learning and development program, right? It was really about, well, how can I make sure that I still have a job next week or next month, right? And so it was in that environment and in considering that context that this still the problem that was presented to me and why I was hired for the 6 months that I was to again implement a solution that was going to drive up the learning development amongst individuals. And so I was given this blank slate of, it can be anything. It was sort of like this canvas of you make it your own. We have no precedent of this before now. And so I leverage my 4 Ps. For me, that was what was important. Um, and so for me, in order to get access to what the ultimate product was going to be, I started with, a similar process that you all are probably familiar with if you've gone through, any sort of UX process. But for me, it was really understanding um, the people, both the ones who were going to be impacted by whatever the solution was going to be. It also included me understanding the people who essentially were being held accountable for their teams and what improvements were being made as it relates to their learning and development, because those two groups of people needed or were being held by different standards, and they were also being seen differently as it relates to what this ultimate solution was going to be. And so really understanding their mindset, what was um, what was important to them, not just from a learning and development standpoint, but also what was important to them at work, right? Because when creating experiences for people, designing any experiences, it's also important to consider the context that happens outside of that unique experience. Meaning, if you're designing, in this case for me, designing a learning and development program, and whatever that product or that was going to look like, it wasn't just important for me to understand their learning journey. It was also really important for me to understand what was their thinking and how they viewed work outside of the things that they're responsible for. Because what is always going to be true with any experience that is created, for me at least, is that the way in which people think and behave um, is really what unites us, but it's also something that should be considered as core whenever designing any kind of micro interactions or how I leverage technology, right? Because the behaviors of our behaviors is something that's going to show up um, in 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 any kind of product that we use. So for me, it was important to really get an understanding of not just how they think about the thing that potentially was going to be created, but also just how they thought about work in context. And so there was that. Then there was also the purpose. Well, why are we even doing this, right? Is it only to increase a score? Because that was one of the benchmarks that we had to leverage, which was a Glint survey that went out quarterly, and they wanted, and the scores were low, and so they wanted to increase those scores, and that was what I was benchmarking my solution against. And so there was that, but also what else does this impact? And why are we doing this? And understanding more of that was important for me as well, and just asking those tough questions in a way that allowed for people to feel safe to share their honest thoughts about those things, which was always interesting to hear what people had to say when you create that safe space for them. Some of which I could not say back when doing my report. But then there's the process looking at, okay, well, how much time do I have? How much time and what kind of resources do I have access to? And resources not just in terms of money, but also in terms of other people within the organization. As you all are very familiar with GitHub, it's a fairly large, startup or a software company, in terms of different departments, and people that are not only work at GitHub, but also that also use their product. And so I needed to understand, what was the scope in which I had access to, these different individuals if I needed to. Once collecting that, it was also then looking at the product of what could this potentially be. So again, I was brought in, um, to create this program during my 6 months. The expectation was that by the end of the 6 month, that I would have something just built out that I can then hand off to someone else to implement and to run and to scale and to get feedback. Um, but what I did, because again, my question that I have in my mind is that question that I shared with you at the beginning, and that is, how can I help to improve and impact people's lives through design? And for me, a very big part of doing that is being able to have a a measurement and a form in which I can see whether or not that actually happened, right? So I say that because even though I was given 6 months to create the solution, I gave myself half that time because I wanted to implement the solution. I wanted to create a feedback loop so that I can understand what was working and what was not working, so that I can then create a version two, and that would be the version that would be used to scale and move forward, right? Because it wasn't enough just to be able to just say, hey, here's this thing, that was based off of this information that I got. So what happened in the end of the 3 months was a system and also an actual program that leveraged both internal resources that were already there and provided through other learning and development programs that were happening for the engineering, that was happening for the product side, but that wasn't apparent, that wasn't evident in the design side. And then I was able to create an internal feedback loop where those who participated in this 2.5 month program, to be able to provide feedback and also to measure that against certain benchmarks that I was able to establish with my manager. And then we were able to look at that. And then that actually lined up with the next Glit survey that came out, and to which we were able to see an improvement in one of the scores, that was within the learning and development, because there were two scores that they were looking at, and one of them improved significantly. The other one barely moved with that. But the goal and the sort of takeaway here with this particular um, uh, solution and my approach to it was that it wasn't just about designing an interaction or an experience that was tied to something exclusively digital. It was creating an experience that was more about this sort of holistic experience, because there were some digital aspects to it, but it was really more so about how were people being engaged in a way that aligned with what was actually occurring for them, and also what was important to them. Um, and then the the last, before we get into guidance, well, first, before I go into this one, I want to stop for a second and ask if there are any questions that might come up that I could answer as I'm going through. I know this is being recorded as well, but if there are, then I can answer them. Um, but if not, I will continue on. Um, so this other sort of, I'll lump it up in a project, but also a role where I got to design and answer the question of how am I using design to improve the lives of people. This took place in the role that I had as a leader for a global community where inclusive leadership was important. And this was actually the largest group of people that I had to create a single streamlined experience for. And so in doing so, my challenge was about finding out what could not only maintain the community that already existed, but what could be designed in a way that will enhance or improve their life again in a meaningful way. And so, community development and management for people who do that primarily as a job is a very difficult thing. And designing any sort of solution to help support that can be challenging, especially when you have people who are in different parts of the world. You have people that were a part of this community that were also internal, but most of these people were not connected to Envision at the time. And so there was also that challenge of how do you create experiences? For me, that I was asking myself is how do I create an experience that engages people that don't have a stake in the company, meaning they weren't getting a paycheck to be a part of this community. Like they didn't have to be a part of this group or to engage in any way. Um, but they but it was important for whatever was created and whatever was to continue to be developed that still allowed for them to engage and also to enroll other people to be a part of that that experience. And so one of the things that helped me that I learned about people through my time engaging with the small business owners, through my time in other work or projects that I've done, and just engaging with people in my personal day to day life. One of the things that is true about people in general, and you probably can relate to this, is that people respond to transparency and vulnerability, right? And so for me, coming in and having to tackle this massive community that expanded all these different areas, I had to find a way to implement a solution that allowed for transparency and vulnerability to exist. And so what that meant for me was I implemented uh, a monthly town hall meeting that essentially shared what was happening within the group. So I was extracting a lot of data from this group existed in Slack. And so I extracted a lot of that information from Slack and using by working with my team member, synthesize all of this data to find what were the topics and the themes that was occurring across many different channels, across many different conversations, and being able to share that back with the community in a way that was informative, but also in a way that sparked more conversation and an opportunity to even share resources amongst each other. Um, this experience, this immediate implementation brought people back into the fold that fizzled out from the community. new ideas started to pour in and more people started sharing tips and challenges and resources because again these are design leaders across not only different companies, but these are design leaders across different levels as well. So you had VPs, you had seniors, you had directors, and you had um, um, uh, uh, even a few that were in the C-suite that were all a part of this community. And so being able to see them come be brought back into the fold because there were opportunities created for them to engage that was unique for them, but also allowing for them to have an experience that they could see their value um, was something that took place immediately with this one change. The other thing that started to happen with creating this and other more experiential opportunities is that this led to a larger role um, within Envision where um, now the conversations and the tips and the experiences that were now being facilitated and orchestrated in a way, they were now turning to actual product experiences, meaning some of the methodologies that a lot of these designers and design leaders were using and had come up with to lead the teams that they were leading and to implement the products that they have implemented. These were being turned into collaborative templates. So with Miro, you all are familiar with how there are certain templates that you can access to be able to execute certain types of either brainstorming sessions and stuff like that. So what I was able to do was I was able to translate a lot of their the sharing that was happening and get that translated into actual framework templates that other people can access and use. So it was a way to, of course, with their buy-in and with in collaboration with those design leaders, to be able to have something that not only was useful for them, but other people now have um, can now see value in it, so that it improves the way in which they were doing their work. Um, it also allowed for a larger array of different types of approaches to solving a problem, which going back to my question and how is this then improving the lives of other people? Well, one is now they had people, designers across that were part of this community across different industries now had access to frameworks and methodologies that just weren't in conversations. They were actual tangible assets that they can now utilize to make their life a little bit easier when implementing solutions for their company, their respective companies. On the flip side, those who were participating and sharing this information, this was also giving them the opportunity to, because they weren't necessarily creating these templates, they were now being able to get their framework translated in a way that it could be replicated and scaled. So it's making their life also easier. Even though they're familiar with the process, they never actually had a tangible asset that they could utilize to be able to implement their work across their different teams, et cetera. So it was benefiting both those who were contributing to these templates and these assets and those who needed some type of framework to help them do their jobs. And so all of this came from, again, from my four P's of really understanding people, seeing what was available, the process, and then being able to implement these few solutions. With the time that we have uh, left, I do want to make sure that I can get to this last piece, which is talking about how all of the work that I did at Envision, the learnings of at GitHub, the learnings with working with small business owners and designing both digital experience, designing these systems, designing these assets through this community, how this all fed into designing this new company and product that's leveraging AI. You notice that I didn't mention a lot of AI in the previous things that I talked about is because for me, AI is a enhancer. It is a tool. It also, in some cases, in many cases, is an equalizer for doing things. And so what's important for me is making sure that the foundation of how I approach solving problems for people is understood and is captured so that when I look to use AI or any other type of advanced technology, that it doesn't trump what's important. It doesn't serve as a replacement for understanding who people actually are, what's how they behave and how they think. It doesn't trump really looking at the context of the problem and the entire system and what needs to be considered. If anything, it is looked at as, well, where in the process, where in how people think and behave can AI be used to enhance and or to support this? And for me, that is the approach that I took when starting this business and also creating this product called Guidance. And so what I do with AI is that I leverage it to give small business owners back the time that they need in order to be able to do what they enjoy most, which could be spending time with family members. A lot of small business owners in my research they didn't start their business just so that they can spend their entire life working on the business. That's not that's not really what it is. It's a means to an end, and an end is really about having the freedom to be able to enjoy life with friends, the freedom to enjoy life with family members, the freedom to travel, to do whatever it is that they want to do, but not necessarily to just only work on that business. And so what I also found is that through my discovery in creating this product is that the time that people lose when it comes to working on their business is pretty significant. They lose about 4 months of time doing administrative work, which is insane. That's almost, we're almost to like half a year of just adding the amount of administrative work that gets done. No small business owner is probably adding up or counting, how much time they're spending on doing, forms or whatever kind of administrative work they need to do because they know it's necessary and it just got to get done. So it gets done, right? But that's what is being taken away. And not only that, it's also eating up to 25% of their annual revenue. So it's a huge pain point that is often overlooked. And it also plays a huge role in terms of burnout. A lot of small business owners end up, burning out, within a few years of running their business for a lot of other factors, but really administratively, it plays a huge role in this process. And so for me, again, going right back to that first question, um, to how can I use design to improve people's lives? I was seeing the problem right there. So I look for problems. Not in my personal life. I definitely don't look for problems in my in my personal life. I try to be drama free, problem free. But when it comes to the work that I do, I look for problems because I want to be able to answer that question. And so this gave me the opportunity to do so. And I looked at, what the profile of users are. And the profile of the small business owners, the ones that I want to focus on for the time being, is that they are usually less than 5 employees. There's usually just one person or maybe one other family member, and they don't have a business background. They usually are not very organized, and they're not, you know, tech savvy in the they can use certain apps. Yes, they can use their phone, the computer, and all of that. But when I say tech savvy, is that they're not necessarily checking for the newest technology to how to use it, etc. So there's an understanding of their thinking and their behavior that I had to consider when building out this product. Because yes, with leveraging AI, there's a lot of things that it can do, but the average small business owner is not necessarily looking to use AI to do all these like cool things. They just want to be able to get their work done, and like they just want their time back. That's it. That's all they want. And so what I have done, and I'm going to cue this up to just share with you, show you a brief reveal of what we've launched recently, um, is that looking at, so first of all, there are 963 different industries in which small business owners exist. That's a lot. We're not trying to solve all of them at one time. As you know, foundationally, when it comes to designing any kind of experience or any kind of product, we have to be very clear about who is going to use our product and who's going to use your product. And that was very true for me. And so I had to really get focused on what it is or who it is that we wanted to create and design for. And so I looked at my locale, which is I'm based here in Hawaii, and one of the biggest industries where a lot of businesses exist is in the food industry. And you can look that up and see all the different reasons why. But that was one of them. There are several others, but that was one of them. And so, also looking at the food industry, I was like, okay, well, what are the administrative tasks that they need to do? There are many of them, but one in particular that stood out is two things. One, having to find local events that they can be vendors, so that they can, have a tent or have a booth and share their food so that they can get more clients and get more customers, right? You've gone to farmers markets, I'm sure, where you've, experienced that. That's one. So there's a challenge though for them, finding ones or finding events that are relevant to their business profile. That takes time for them to have to go and search and look on Instagram or even look on Eventbrite if they are on Eventbrite, because not every event that's happening is going to show up on these different networks, right? So that's a lot of time that goes into first investigating events. So that was one problem. The second problem, which is this was shocking to me. And that is one of the forms that they have to fill out that in order to participate in any event is something called the special events permit. The special events permit is a very manual process, meaning right now, a small business owner in Hawaii and actually in um, 25 other states in the mainland. So in half of the US still has this particular process where they have to get this PDF. Um, they have to download it because it's not fillable. So you have to download it, or you have to either use a fillable software, which even if you do that, it's not going to add the fields in the proper places. So that's out of the question. So they typically download it and they manually fill out this form. Now you would think, okay, well, maybe they can upload it back and send it into the email. No, they have to then drive to an office that, depending on where they're located on the island, that could be anywhere from 40 minutes to an hour drive to go and drop off this form to then get approved within the week to participate in this upcoming vendor. As you can imagine, as a small business owner who's doing a bunch of other things, that is a time suck, right? Depending on what time you go, you run into traffic, like there's a whole lot. And so that's the starting point for us, is to be able to unlock the potential of time being saved by addressing the findability of events, but also adding those events to the calendar, right? Because there's also piece, because once they find it, not every event that they find is there a link for them to just add it to their working calendar. They have to either like copy it or write it down and then go to their calendar and add the information, etc. And so this the time that it takes to do all of what I just shared with you, from one of the small business owners that I spoke to, takes them about 3 hours a week to do all of that. To find an event, add to the calendar, fill out the form, go to the office, do all that stuff. What we've been able to do is that we've been able to streamline that into 15 minutes, which is like, yay, time. And that for me, it sounds huge. It's huge because it becomes something that you can now add in terms of how much time they're now going to get back to do a lot of other things that they can do. But it wasn't about utilizing AI to just for the sake of it, but it was being able to utilize it in a way that people can see the value immediately without AI screaming at them. Meaning, AI for us is a background addition to what the value of the product is that we're doing. So, with that being said, I want to show you a quick little demo of what we've created. This is MVP, and it is by definition truly that MVP. There's definitely more improvements to be made, but give me 1 second. Let me going to switch. All right. So what you're seeing right now is just a very simple interface where those two areas or there's two problems are being addressed. Um, the goal with our product is to be able to have one central assistant that deploys different agents to do these different tasks. So what you're looking at is me, asking a question. So let me start from. I'll actually just go from the top where it started. So here is guidance basically asking upon sign up, the user is greeted or the small business owner is greeted with this question with Aloha, because also the other thing is to note is that this is designed specifically for small business owners in Hawaii. The idea with guidance is to ultimately replicate that and scale that across different states because every single state, based on research, they have a different way of working. There's a different way in which small businesses engage, different vernacular, all of those things. And again, for me, those 4 Ps are very important. So making sure that this is tailored to small businesses in Hawaii is necessary. And so we're using vernacular that people are comfortable or familiar with. um, it asks for any events that they want to know about the next month. I said to show me events for the next month. It gave me events from different islands. And so I asked, well, can you just show me the ones for happening in Eva Beach? There aren't any in Eva Beach. And then I said, well, okay, well, then just look at the island that I'm on, Oahu. It gave me these events. And so here's where really the time and the differentiator between what we're doing and any other LLM is able to do for small business owners is that, yes, I could probably get this list on like ChatGPT or anywhere else, but it's this question that I asked here, which is, can you add the first 4 events to my calendar? And so I asked, and it did create more details. And so now if I click on um, this, it will bring up my calendar because I've signed up. And I immediately can just add that event with that information to my calendar and I can hit save. And then I can go back and I can add the next one. And so, what would normally take a small business owner a significant amount of time to write this down, or if the event had an event saved to my calendar piece that they could add that, but typically they don't. They could just quickly just click on each one, add it, and keep it moving, because that's the kind of speed in the behavior that uh, they expect and would want in order for them to feel like their time is being saved. So there's that piece. And then I won't go through all of this per se, but the other part, the special events form, is allowing for the form to be filled out um, through a conversation. And so this can be applicable to a lot of other things, and that's a whole nother conversation. We can have that through question and answers. But ultimately, this a person who needs to get this form filled out, they would the guidance will use their profile information, fill out the necessary, the already existing information, and through a series of questions, they could get the rest of the form filled out. The other the other component about this or to this is that the if there's a question that is being asked that is on the form that the small business owner is not familiar with, the person could have a conversation about what does that actually mean, and then they would get some clarity around that question before they provide an answer. And so there is that takes place, so that it feels very natural, it feels very comfortable for the small business owner when having to fill out this form. See, when you do a live demo, what happens? So it's still thinking, but it does work and it does do the thing. There probably some development happening on my end, but I'll stop there, and I can take some questions.